Looking at the second part, breaking down complex sentences. We spoke yesterday about the Puritan plain style, and it seems difficult today, but back in the 1600s, it's just the way people spoke. So as you think about conversations that you've had with your friends talk in fragments or run-ons, and you don't really think anything of it, but because you're a part of the active conversation, you understand exactly what they're trying to say. It's pretty much the same way with Puritan plain style, but we break down the who or what and the action of the sentence to help us make meaning from the text. Reading strategy today is breaking down complex sentences. The first step is to monitor your reading and to check your comprehension. So as you read, I want you to think, what just happened? What did I read? Sometimes when we're reading, we get to the end of a page or a paragraph and we have no idea what just happened. In a book that we enjoy, we might go back and read that part again to figure out what happened, but in a book that is assigned by our teacher, we might just say, well, I read it. So the purpose of this is to clarify the meaning and isolate the main idea of those complex sentences so that as you read, you're able to understand what you're reading. And there are two sections to this. The first thing is who or what is this about? And then the second part is what is the action that occurred? So here I'm going to model my thinking for you. And before I step in the model, I just kind of want to outline a couple of things so that you know what you're looking for as I model. The first thing is I gave you those questions, but as I model, I want you to follow along in the passage, and I want you to focus on the questions that I ask myself because I'm going to break down this process as I go. I'm also going to ask questions of you, and you are welcome to push pause as you watch the video to help make sure that you've mastered this material. Obviously, on your handout, you have the exact same question, so feel free to write this down on your handout because as you follow along, I write and you'll master the material. Okay, so this is from paragraph 1, and I know the first thing that I need to do is read. And when I read, I should always annotate the text as I read to help me to identify those keywords. And then if I get to the end and I don't really understand what I've done, those keywords can help me to figure out what the pieces are that I know so I can put it back together in the end. So, after they had enjoyed fair winds and weather for a season, they were encountered many times with crosswinds and met with many fierce storms, with which the ship was shrewdly shaken, and her upper works made very leaky. And one of the main beams in the midships was bowed and cracked, which put them in some fear that the ship could not be able to perform the voyage. So they enjoyed fair winds and weather for a season, but then they were encountered with crosswinds, and I know that I hear them talk about crosswinds on highways when they're doing the weather report, and then many fierce storms, with which the ship was shrewdly shaken. So the ship was shaken about, and the upper works were made leaky. So the weather seems to have damaged the boat because it's leaking. So one of the main beams in the ship, so the main beam in the ship was bowed and cracked, which put them in fear that the ship could not be able to perform the voyage. So I've annotated the text, and I know the next thing that my teacher tells me to do is to think about the who or what and the action. All right, I'm going to step out here for a second. What I want to point out to you as you move into this next step is this who or what and the action is not new information. If this were a grammar-related task, we would be looking at the subject and we would be looking at the verb or the predicate. So that's essentially what we're doing here. When I'm looking at a really complex sentence, such as this one, I may have more than one subject and I may have more than one predicate. So it's going to be a compound complex type sentence. So there's a lot for me to think about. So as I break it down and look at the who and the what, that use of subject and verb/predicate is going to help me to identify exactly what's happening in this sentence. Once I've done that, I can move into the paraphrase and really process this excerpt of text. So, stepping back into the model, I'm going to change back to red. And as I model through these questions, I'm actually going to type my answers because I can type much faster than I can write. When I think about who or what, and I'm looking at this subject here, I notice a few things. first of all, there's talk about they. So I feel like my subject is they. And I want to know who is they. And as I read through this and I think about it, I've noticed that there's no mention of God. So I'm thinking passengers. And so I'm going to kind of make a note to myself here. No mention of God equals crew, because the passengers were very religious. And I know that they would have been very concerned about God or referenced God. The other thing that we talk about in this example is the boat. And when I think about the boat, what about the boat? I want to look at that as well. So I'm going to go to my action. And my who and my what gives me the subject, but I really want to look at where I'm going next and what happens next. So it's not just about the boat, but it's about the next piece to it. So I'm going to drop down here and talk about my action. So who or what is the action about the they? Well, they is the people on the boat. So what about they? Well, they had decent weather. But then it says they were encountered with crosswinds and met with many fierce storms. So I'm going to say they had decent weather, but it changed. And then I want to think about the boat. So if the boat is another who or what happened to the boat? And the boat, as I look up here, it says the upper works were made leaky, the main beam was bowed and cracked, and it put them in fear that the ship could not perform the voyage. So that's another thing about they. So they had decent weather, but it changed. So what about the boat? Well, the boat was damaged. And it leaked. And then I'm going to add about that part of the frame. And because the boat was damaged, the people feared making it. Now, in this part, in my who and my what, I'm going to step out here for a second. So I looked at my annotation first. Then I thought about who or what, and I used that to drive my action. I am intentionally breaking this down into 2 steps here because I want to make sure I've thoroughly analyzed what's going on in these sentences, because there can be some pretty complex information. In this one, it talked about they, and then it talked about the boat. And then in that cause and effect type relationship, there was another thing with the they. So then I looked at the action and I thought, so what about they? What about boat? And now I'm ready to go in and to paraphrase this statement. So my next step is going to be to paraphrase, to put it together. And I know that we've talked about what a paraphrase is. A paraphrase is when I take it and I just say it in my own words. And because this is Puritan plain style, looking at it in my own words is going to help me to verify it. I'm going to put together my who or what and my action, and my paraphrase needs to be in a complete sentence. So I'm going to step back into my model, and now that you know what I'm going to do, I want you to watch how I do that, because I am going to expect you to carefully craft these sentences on your own. Okay, stepping in. So I'm going to kind of put together, I know that it talked about they and the weather and what the weather did to the boat, and then as a result, how that affected the people. So I'm going to say the crew and passengers enjoy, I'm going to say they had decent weather for a while. Now, I know it's a while because it says for a season. But then there were those crosswinds and the fierce storms. Storms damaged the ship, comma, and some feared, whether or not the leaky ship would make it to the new land. Okay, so I want you to stop and I want you to think. What did I do? In order to create my paraphrase, I went back to my who or what and my action. I put those together, and I wrote it in a complete sentence. Why is it so important for me to look at the who or what and the action? I don't want to leave any key information out because I know in a paraphrase I'm saying the same thing in different words. And when I'm looking at the who or the what and the action, I might have forgotten something. If I hadn't gone back to the reference of they being used twice, I might have missed the part that they feared whether or not they would make it to the new land. So as we close, I just kind of want to reiterate and point out a few things. First of all, in my who or what, I asked myself, who or what is doing something? Who or what is this about? And in Puritan plain style, most of the time you'll have more than one thing. Next, I went to my action. What about my subject? So when I say who, what about who? Or what about the what? What actually happened? Now, my who and what and my action doesn't necessarily have to be in a complete sentence. But then I put those two things together and I come up with my paraphrase. Now, the reason I've stopped and thought about who or what and that action is because I don't want to leave any key details out. So when I build my paraphrase, you'll notice not only is it a complete sentence, I made sure that it didn't miss any of that information from the actual passage itself. So I still have all of that vital information. At this point, if you have any questions, I want you to stop and use the back channel conversation and just kind of give me thoughts on any questions you have, any thoughts, ideas, concerns. What do you think about this process of using the who or what and the action in order to help paraphrase and to make sure that you have not forgotten any key details? So with each excerpt, you'll notice that there's a question at the bottom, and the purpose of the question is to just kind of reiterate some of the skills that we've worked on and to really help us to think critically about the excerpt of text that we have just paraphrased. So as you look at this one, what is the tone of this passage? And as a result, what might be the mood? Now this down here is called a TDQ. It's a text-dependent question. You cannot answer this question unless you actually look at and process the information in the text. And with this, I want you to go back and use that race process. Now, I'm not going to model this for you because we've already modeled what it means to race through. But keep in mind, I do want you to make sure that you have a complete sentence. And that you've answered the whole thing. And part of that is going to be using those key terms from the question stem. I've seen you guys do that throughout all of Module 1, and I feel confident in your ability to do that here because this is just a little bit of reteaching. If you look at your reading guide, you'll recognize another example. I want you to go through and apply the exact same steps and use those same guiding questions. I'll be more than happy to come over and help you do this if you'd like to call me over. If you have any questions, you can also use the back channel conversation. If you're at home, you're welcome to try the email or any of those other options. In the classroom, you can ask a partner if you're at the same place in the lesson. But I just kind of want to recap exactly what it is that you're doing so that we can make sure that we really understand where we're going with this information. So the first step that you took was to actually read and annotate. And I want you to ask yourself, what stands out? Why? That might mean underlining, that might mean adding notes on the side. Step number 2, we identified the who or the what. So you're going to ask yourself, what is this about? And then, because of the fact that it is Puritan plain text, I'm going to ask, is that all? Because in our example, we talked about they, but it wasn't just about the they. It was about something happening to the boat as well. So then we went and we identified the action. So what is happening to the who or what? In other words, what about it? Why do I care? Remember when you're looking at your action to go back to your who or what and make sure you've gone through each thing. We talked about what they did. They enjoyed the nice weather. They feared their safety. What about the boat? What happened to it? The boat was damaged in the storm. People feared that it wouldn't make it. The next step that we took was to put it together to paraphrase. How can I write a complete sentence and include all key ideas? And then step 5, double check. Did I include everything? If you have any questions, please feel free to use our back channel conversation, to use email, or to reach out to a peer. At this point, I'm going to kind of break away and give you the time to go through and complete your reading guide. Once you hit some of the other questions, we're going to assume that you're able to do the who or what in the action, because all semester long we've been identifying subjects and verbs. So once you've gotten in the habit of going through that process of knowing what you're doing, we want to make sure that we've got that paraphrase. So go ahead, put your paraphrase together, make it a complete sentence, and then go back and look at it. You want to make sure that you've included all of those key details. You want to make sure that you've got the who or the what, and you want to make sure that you've got the action. Again, at the bottom, you'll have some TDQs, so you want to go through and do that. So you're going to follow the process with the paraphrase. This is what I modeled for you. These were those steps. And then down here, the TDQs, I did not model for you, but you have mastered race in the last module, and you're going to apply race as you answer these. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing your completed paper tomorrow.